Hello. Today we're going to talk about stereotypes and how they pertain to communication. We live in a world that is becoming more increasingly diverse. What once was a very large world is now becoming increasingly smaller due to the vehicles which we allow us to communicate through. Unlike ever before, we are now able to communicate with people around the globe in a moment's notice. The way we communicate attracts people's attention more than ever. Our desire to communicate enhances our interpersonal relationships. However, sometimes this can be hindered also by stereotypes. Take a look at these pictures. What do you see when you look at these people? Are they approachable? Could you guess what type of jobs they do? Do you think you'd communicate with each of them differently based on stereotypes you may see? Now, imagine moving each of these individuals' job titles one over to the right. Has anything changed your mind? Would you approach them any differently? Stereotypes are simply a cognitive representation of another group that influences our feeling towards members of that group. Sort of like pictures in our heads. Stereotypes have both a cognitive and affective component. They are the projections upon the world of our own sense of value, our own position, and our own rights. The stereotypes are therefore highly charged with feelings that are attached to them. When you look at these two women, are you starting to develop a backstory for each of their lives? Can you tell if one or both of them are successful? Well, what if I told you that this is actually the same person? The only difference is in fact the hair color. Stereotypes in and of themselves do not lead to miscommunication or communication breakdowns. To some extent, people's assumptions to others leads to these stereotypes. The accuracy of our predictions depends on whether the traits that we include in our own stereotypes of another group are similar to the ones in that group's stereotypes of its own group. In other words, we're trying to see if our stereotypes are valid or not. So take a look at these three individuals right here. The only thing that I'm going to tell you is that none of these people are American. So where do you think they're from? And what kind of accents do you think they have? So also consider, knowing that they're not American, do you see yourself approaching or communicating with these people any differently? I'll give you a few seconds to rationalize that and make a guess. Okay, you guys ready? So, we do this all the time, every day to people, right? And the majority of the time we're doing this, we're completely unaware of it. So, did you guess it right? If you did, good for you. You have very accurate stereotypes. When we place someone in a category, our stereotypes of people in that category helps us predict his or her behavior. In other words, we are able to reduce our uncertainty because we assume that our stereotypes tell us how a typical group member communicates. So now let's spend a little bit of time talking about what kind of stereotypes there are. Now, since there's so many out there, I'll just talk to some of the more common stereotypes, some of the more common ones that we're accustomed to. So the first one kind of being age, right? You'll see a young person out there, and what kind of stereotypes come to mind? Maybe you think that they're immature, or maybe not as educated, rather than when you might see an older person, right? You immediately kind of assume, hey, this person's probably not too good with technology, social media, or up to things like that. And then there's race. A lot of racial stereotypes stem from when we were children. They can be influenced by not associating with a particular race too often, or maybe someone you know had, for some reason, a slight against a particular group. Unfortunately, though, a lot of these racial bias and stereotypes come from many social media outlets. And then there's the background. Have you ever assumed just by looking at someone what their upbringing might be or who they might be? I know you have because I asked you earlier in the slide. But we do this all the time, and once again, we're usually unaware that it's even happening. But what about education? Do you know anybody who dropped out of high school? If so, what do you think about them? Are they dumb? Unsuccessful? Doomed for a life of poverty? I mean, it sounds pretty harsh, but these are the real things that we internalize on it, like every day. Sexual preference. So, although we are much more accepting culture than we were previously, there are still a lot of biases and opinions depending on like how you feel about the issue, right? Many people were born in traditional households and still unaccepting of other life choices. Which kind of leads me right into the religion. There has been many wars fought over religious beliefs, right? The interpretation of whose God is right, what culture is wrong, and usually doesn't end with very much communication. So how do we overcome some of these barriers of communication? Some people are explicitly racist, sexist, classist, and even homophobic and don't care. This clearly divides as well as puts obstacles in the path of our communication. However, implicit bias is a huge problem too. Implicit bias refers to a sneakier attitude or stereotypes that kind of hold but are not generally aware of, Your belief may be that everyone is equal, but you may find yourself reacting inconsistently to different situations based off these implicit bias. However, some of these stereotypes can be helpful and convenient generalizations which may help rationalize a type or class of people and what they may think or act, such as a person with a degree is often able to assimilate quite complex data. But on the other hand, it's also the case that stereotypes can be applied in a less than helpful and even negative kind of way. A common example here might be something like people who teach can't do, or people who teach can't get a real job, or even female managers can't take high levels of pressure. So even these stereotype opinions often lead to not only unwanted or possible unfair attitudes when communicating with the individuals from this class, but it also may cause harm or suffering to the individuals to whom the stereotypes are being applied to, especially when it's a personalized generalization. So the first thing you want to do is realize that we have these stereotypes, right? Even the best of us stereotype people. It's something that just happens, but we have to be aware of it. That way we can try and combat it. Like the saying goes, step one is admitting you have a problem. Be aware of cultural differences. Understand that you may work with people who are not native English speakers. Learn how those of different cultures in your workplace typically communicate. A little bit of research might go a long way with improving those kind of relationships. Don't avoid problems. In fact, you should probably take them head on. Misunderstandings can hinder an organization's productivity. Always try and clarify instructions, even if they're unclear. Be aware of norms and roles. These are the informal guidelines of behavior in a code of conduct that provides some order and conformity to a group's activities and operations. These rules are expected to be followed by all group members. Our stereotypes tend to be activated automatically when we categorize strangers and when we are not communicating mindfully. The bottom line is, stereotypes lead to miscommunication. To avoid these unjust stereotypes, we should be conscious that the problem of misinterpreting others' behavior is compounded because we tend to interpret strangers' behavior on the basis of our own frame of reference. In addition, with stereotypes, people are likely to estimate the information they get from communication incorrectly. The skills necessary to communicate effectively and appropriately with the people are those that are directly related to reducing our uncertainty, accepting of others, and reflecting on our own ideas about why you think people are different. Regardless of your associations, personal or professional, none are immune to communication. It's how we express ourselves, our wants, and desires. Words are a somewhat blunt instrument to do so. but they're the most effective tool we've got. So in order to communicate effectively, we must do our best every day to rid ourselves of these barriers of stereotypical behavior. Thank you.